Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we are joined by Caitriona Ellis. Fascinating to hear her story. She's an expert in financial wellness, and so ties really well into our topic. And look forward to hearing some insights from her today. Caitriona, do you want to give us a brief overview, a little bit about your experience and your background?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Liam, for having me. I'm originally from Ireland. I moved to the Isle of Man, which is a little island off the coast of Ireland between Great Britain, about 6 years ago. My background is Bachelor of Commerce, and I'm also a qualified financial advisor and a estate agent. I've been in the financial wellness space personally for the last 6 years, and then from a business perspective in the last 18 months or so. I've got three kids who I home educated, two of them, and I am particularly passionate about all things financial wellness and education based also. So that's a nutshell version.
Very cool. When you say you're a state agent, what does that mean? Not trying to draw the equivalence to your state side.
Sure. Real estate. So you have realtor, I think is a term you guys use. So it was something that I had absolutely no interest in terms of qualification. However, some of your listeners may be aware the Isle of Man is considered to be an offshore island, which means that it is a jurisdiction and tax haven all by itself. So it has particularly high compliance requirements. So for me to operate, two of my businesses are real estate based, and I had to have that particular level of qualification to actually even set the business up. And I'm regulated by the Financial Services Authority here. So it was something that I acquired at the back end of last year in a record 2 months for a qualification that normally takes 18 months. So I was under a bit of pressure to get it done. So it's just something from my perspective for compliance that I needed to tick a box.
Interesting. Tick a box, but obviously rounds out a lot of it. Sounds like where your businesses are and where your expertise is, and amazing that was a requirement just to do business.
Absolutely.
Where you live.
Very cool. It was, a frustration at the beginning, but it was something that has stood me a good stead. And because, I didn't necessarily require that information or qualification to operate what I do, but just because of the extra caution that they practice here, because we're offshore from a compliance perspective. But it's really opened my eyes to a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have had sight of had I not done it. So, to me, there's always a silver lining, and it was an irritation at the time to have to do it. But looking back, it was really interesting, and it woke quite a few of my dead brain matter, I think, up after being motherhood for quite a chunk of time. I needed to actually get a bit of a kickstart, and that really boosted me from that perspective. So it was good. There was lots of pros to it.
That's good. Swift kick in the butt to get moving, right?
Absolutely. Nothing like it.
Can you share a little bit? Obviously, you teach a lot and you're well adept in the financial space. Kind of what you're doing today and how you got there, and some of your experience that informs, what makes you the amazing leader that you are.
Sure. Well, I suppose my first foray into financial stuff, I came from my education, I suppose, is commerce based. So I've always been drawn to that world. And my work experience is based in the banking industry, predominantly across the UK, Australia, and Ireland. So when I was about to become a mother for the first time in 2008, I stepped out of that corporate world reluctantly to a point, because I really enjoyed it, but there was no comparison. I wanted to be home full time, and that was it. We subsequently then moved down the country to be closer to family for childcare, etc. And we found ourselves in a situation of having two mortgages. We were unable to sell our house in Dublin, so we decided to rent it and became accidental landlords. And because I was a bank employee at that time, we had two 100% mortgages. So at the time, it felt like an enormous stress to have not one, but two 100% mortgages. Now I look at it as an absolute gift, because we had no money in our house. But at the time, it's a huge stress. So we found ourselves in a position around, we moved again our second house in 2009, and it was just as everything crashed from a property perspective. So we were really stuck in a bad place, and our income that was coming in, which was just my husband's salary at the time, was just about covering of what we had going out. And we always were used to having two salaries and a nice cushion, and there was never that sense of hand to mouth. But when we had the crash happened, the mortgages as well, I distinctly remember it was an October morning. Two of my children were born in October. We were having their birthday party, and on the doorstep landed two letters from the bank on both our mortgages. The interest rates had gone up by 0.5%. There was no increase in the interest rates across the board. It was just the bank, this particular bank. They had a massive hole that they needed to fill, and so they decided just to, out of the blue, increase the rates. That single action freaked the living daylights out of me and gave me such a sense of yikes, okay, we can just about keep our heads above water with this particular increase, but if they do it again, which there's nothing to stop them because it was a variable rate, I thought, I really don't like that sense of disease. That's my financial future is in somebody else's hands, and they can do this ad lib, and we've authorized them to do this. So I thought, okay, there must be another way. I'd come from a background financially where it was hand to mouth also. So I didn't have any other training. So I thought, okay, there has to be another way. And so I put feelers out, and I started searching for somebody who could show me a better way. And definitely at that point in a really strong sense of financial desperation. So I came across an amazing lady called Anne Wilson. She's the Welsh chef. She's from South Africa. And I started by buying her book. And her book was, I mean, a lot of financial books are hard reading, walking through cement, but this was just a breath of fresh air. It was done, written using cooking analogy, which, you know, it's cooking something I love. So I totally resonated with it. It was very simply written. There was quite a simple formula, and it instantly made a lot of sense to me. And my instant reaction was like, great, there's another way. And my second reaction was, why the hell wasn't I taught this in school, in university, in the bank, in all the places that, you know, I'd been where I had access to this type of information? None of these principles were taught. So that stayed with me, and I've continued to work with her, and she still remains my coach. And that single action resulted in me turning everything around from being in a place of financial desperation with 3 very young kids at that stage, and looking ahead and just seeing, you know, quite a bleak financial future. And I thought, I wanted better for them, I wanted better for me. And so everything turned around from there. So when COVID hit, and moving to the Isle of Man was part of that, because I had conversation with my coach at one stage. And in Ireland, you may be aware, we've got a pretty high tax rate. The public services are pretty shocking. With 3 small kids, you know, wanting that healthcare, we had private health insurance, but that's still, anytime I took my kids to the hospital, it was €100 just to be seen. Doctor was something similar. Dentist was the same. I just thought, no, with insurance, this is what the cost. And I thought, why are we paying our tax? And it was an irritation. And then, you know, as I talked to my coach, he said, well, you know, it's up to you as to how much tax you pay. And I thought, hang on a second, what do you mean it's up to me? You know, the government set the rate. I can't do anything about that. And she said, well, no, but you decide where you live. And I thought, oh, yeah, I guess I do. And then as these things happen, once you put those things out there, a couple of weeks later, my husband got an opportunity to move to the Isle of Man, which is an offshore jurisdiction, as mentioned. And so the tax is much more favorable. Plus, we have an NHS system, a public health system, which is, you know, covered for by our taxes. So that felt like a better fit. And so we upped sticks with 3 kids, which was a massive move to make, but we were committed to turning things around. And so that was part of it. So yes, it was sacrifice, it was challenge, there was lots of, you know, tough stuff involved in it, and 3 little people in tow as well. But it was a case of make or break. We needed to make that move if we wanted a different trajectory. So we were prepared to do that. And from there, you know, everything really changed, and it's been a journey since then. And then, you know, just as we thought things were settling down and there was some kind of, you know, there was light at the end of the tunnel, COVID struck last year, and my husband is an airline pilot. And obviously, the pandemic hit quite severely the airline industry. So overnight, the only income we had to the house was gone, because I was home educating full time. So I had given up my income, and that was quite frightening. However, because of the work that we put in, you know, from that first realization back in 2015, we had lots of safety nets in place, and we weren't losing sleep about whether we could cover a mortgage, whether we could put food on the table. That was all okay. We had time to draw a breath, Despite the shocking news, we were able to see the wood from the trees. And that was when I decided, okay, I don't want to put all our eggs in one basket in terms of income. And I decided to jump back in a working seat. And yeah, things have unfurled from there by setting up three companies in the last 18 months, acquiring a number of qualifications, and just adding to those multiple streams of income to never find myself in a place again, of having to struggle financially. So it's been a hell of a ride. It's been eye-opening, and yeah, it's been amazing to see when this kind of very simple information is in people's hands. It's very empowering as to what they can do once they have that information, and they have the belief that, yeah, you know what, this isn't rocket science, and I can empower myself to actually make different choices to influence how my life plays out financially.
What an amazing journey, right? And you talked a little bit about going from, hand to mouth and living paycheck to paycheck to establishing that, consistency, to having changes from the pandemic to, adjusting, and to a lot of things that have happened that you've kind of pivoted over the years. I'm curious, and ties into our topic, right? As you've moved from the hand to mouth to the, hey, I can draw a breath and we're not worried and we've got other safety nets, right? As you move from hand to mouth to that stage, and you didn't have to worry about, the food on the table, the roof over the head, how did you think about what those steps were to create those safety nets, or to create, that environment? And, where did you decide to put your money or business money to set you up for success, or to have the flexibility when the pandemic hit?
Well, I think the first step for me, and in everything I teach, is about vision. So it's about having, from the very beginning when I started working on this stuff, it was about getting clear on what exactly was my end game. Because until I had sight of that, it was very difficult to ascertain as to what my next step was. I was constantly second guessing myself if this was the right fit, as to whatever was presented. So I spent quite a bit of time getting clear on that. And the way, when I teach it now, the way I approach it is I get clients to identify what their ideal day would be. So, from the time you open your eyes in the morning, where are you? Who are you with? What are you doing? And then how does your day unfurl from there? And when people really feel into that with all their senses and light their brain up, and I have a little recorded audio that I've run people through, it really gets them thinking and feeling with every cell in their body as to what that looks like. And when you have that alive, there's a few different expressions about, when you believe it, you'll see it. And it's really about that belief, and having it and feeling it and behaving in that way, that it's already happened, because you can see it so clearly in your mind's eye with such great detail. So for me and for clients, that's the key step. It's very important, because if you start off on this journey and you start to take different steps, you get your different investments in place, and you think, well, it's a little bit like kind of a ship without a rudder. You have no idea. You're doing all these things, and you're making all these motions and actions and stuff, putting stuff in place, but you've no idea where you're heading. So to me, that it's totally pointless. So getting clarity on that piece in the first place is really, really important. The second piece, and kind of when and how I put all this together in terms of my financial wellness stuff, is I reflected really. I like to do things really simply. 3 kids, I don't have time to, pontificate and whatever. Ideas just come to me randomly. And when I was looking at this financial wellness stuff, I was like, how can I make it really simple? And so I thought, okay, well, what did I do? So I looked back over when I transitioned from desperation to wellness, and I thought, okay, well, the first thing was that, I had an idea where I was headed. So, okay, that has to be the first step. The second piece was, I started to create a really healthy relationship with my money. And those two pieces to me are absolutely foundational before you go anywhere near making investments, adding streams of income, or any of that stuff. Those two pieces are absolutely key. And when I talk about a relationship with money, there's 2 pieces that I mean. One is around gratitude, and having that really a huge sense of gratitude for everything that you have right now. Because in 2015, when I started on this, I was living in a beautiful detached house on half an acre with my 3 happy, healthy children. And we had an income in the house, and we were able to put a roof over our heads and food on the table. Yet I had a sense of lack and scarcity, and lots of people would look in at where I was and go, God, she's so lucky. But I didn't see that. And it wasn't until I leaned into a sense of gratitude. And every night before I would go to bed, I used to start journaling. And then I was so lazy and tired by the time I got to the end of the day, I actually just used to run through it mentally in my head as to the listing out the things I was grateful for. And they were things like having a roof over my head, having food in my presses, having money in my account to pay for my light and electricity, having happy, healthy children, having space around that they could run free. And simple things like that. And the more I felt into that, the more I started to behave as if I was somebody actually who was really well off. So nothing materially changed in my world, yet my perspective and my experience of wellness overnight changed by including that practice. And to me, those are the two fundamental pieces to starting that relationship. Once those pieces are in place, then you start looking at things like your retirement planning and your different streams of income and stuff. And my journey in terms of investments began with €20, which I don't know in terms of dollars is probably maybe $25. So it's not exactly going to set the world on fire with $25 a month. However, what it did do was show my money and myself that I was serious about making a regular commitment to putting money away. And that €20 very quickly increased to 50% of our income as I saw what was happening with my money. I started to understand the investments that I was investing in much better. And so the money crept up and up and up. And then compound interest and the magic that it brings just it just was like magic dust sprinkled on our money. And the amazing thing that my eyes were open to was like, I had very little to do with that. All I did was make that commitment, set up that payment, and it was automated because I didn't have time to sit around at home and watch what was going up and down, whatever. I was buying, Warren Buffett is somebody I have huge admiration for. And I was buying one of his favorite products, which is index trackers. So I was buying some very simple things, on the FTSE 250 index tracker and the S&P on the American market, and I let those do their thing. And it was automated and it was simple and the costs were low. And the more money I put into it, the more it mushroomed. So for me, they were some of the very simple steps that I started on. And that's something that I really like to get across to people when they're starting out on this journey, is that make sure that you get the foundations, some really rock solid foundations in place in terms of your vision and your relationship with money. Because I see and I see on my doorstep at the moment, people can have, can be very well off, but they don't have that sense of wellness financially. And that to me is very, very important, because you see people time and time again with a lot of money in the bank, a lot of investments, real estate, and they're well diversified, yet it's not bringing them happiness. It doesn't give them a sense of wellness, and they still have this sense of lack. And you think, why do they not have that? And to me, it's because those foundational pieces are not in place. So whilst those pieces that I outline may seem very simple, to me, they're absolutely fundamental before you go forward from there.
So it sounds like that the vision, the gratitude, the relationship of money, extremely foundational for you, right? And then it sounds like just starting, right? Whatever the amount, start to build the habits of what that, saving, investing look like to create something that has the opportunity to mushroom for you in the future. As we fast forward a bit, you talked about having a variety of safety nets. Obviously, you're involved in the real estate space. How did that evolve for you, right? After you set that foundation in terms of, great, I should be doing X, Y, Z. And how did you think about those in terms of, do you go buy property? Do you put more in the, the indices that you were talking about from Buffett, right? Do you put more in just cash? How did you think, how do you put back into the business or, your coaching relationship, invest in yourself? How did you kind of think through, what made the most sense for you to put that money so that you had a variety of safety nets that you have today?
Well, I think I am very much seat of my pants with a lot of stuff. And I think, I don't know if guys can relate to this, but I think females, for me, one of my superpowers is intuition. And it was putting one foot in front of the other and thinking, okay, well, what feels like the right next step? When I started with that €20, that felt like the right next step. And when I could see that it was working really well, then I thought, okay, well, what feels next? Okay, well, next the thing feels, let's increase that up and let's see what it can do, because everything that I did had to be aligned with my values. So at that time, I had minimal amount of time. I was pretty sleep deprived, so I didn't want anything too taxing mentally because I didn't have the bandwidth to do it. So I thought, okay, I've set this up. Let's just increase that. And then at that time, I understood, in terms of asset classes, equities were a massive piece. And I thought, okay, well, I've got that box ticked. I've got my index trackers, so I've got something there. And property, we had a house we were living in, so we thought, okay, well, we're building up some equity in that, and we had one in Dublin where we were renting out, so we had an interest in property. But at that time, the interest in property for me, because I was a very hands-on landlord, it wasn't a pleasant experience. And whilst I knew when you look at when a lot of the, major money is made and the top 100 rich list or whatever, property forms, real estate forms a massive part of that. And I knew I needed a bigger presence in that respect. But at that time, I didn't enjoy the relationship I had in the real estate space. So what I did was I sought out index trackers, which were property based, but in the equity space. So I kind of had a foot in each camp. So that felt like, okay, well, that's aligned to what I have the mental capacity to do, but it's giving me some exposure, in equities and in property in a way that's manageable to me. And then fast forward, last year, just before kind of lockdown happened here, I had just completed a 4-day course with a close friend, and we had started to explore getting into property in another way, kind of acquiring a really strong portfolio, but in a hands-free way. And we knew what we wanted, but we didn't know how we were going to actually bring it to life. We actually had flights booked to go to Newcastle in the northeast of England, beginning of April, and obviously they went out the window with COVID. So we thought, okay, well, we still know what we want. We had identified our gold mine area where we wanted to invest. We had both lived there and knew the possibilities there. But we couldn't get to it. So it's like, okay, well, next problem, right, what's the solution? So, I did a lot of networking, came across an individual who was based there, who had a portfolio himself of 120 units and who had acquired those over 3 decades. So it was by continually knowing what we wanted and knowing that we needed to find somebody who fitted what we were looking for. And lo and behold, as the universe provides when you get clear on what you're looking for, back to that vision again, we met somebody who was able to provide us exactly that plus more. So this partner that we work with now in the Northeast sources properties for us. He has one, he sends it through to us. We say yes or no. We then look after the finance and the legals on it. And he will then, once it completes, he will pick up the keys, change the locks, manage the refurbishment, find the tenant, manage the letting. So it's like, yes. And I have nothing to do with it. I got an email this morning when I woke up, 3 emails for the 3 that we have so far. Ping, 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 here's your rent's being paid. We've made a deduction for storm damage because we've had a couple of big storms recently, but I knew nothing about it and I don't need to know anything about it. And that to me is my ideal way of doing real estate or property. So we've got 3 more, which were due to complete Tuesday, but real estate being real estate, they fell over at the last minute with an issue. So they'll complete earlier in the new year. So we've acquired 6 in 12-month periods, and we've never seen any of them. They are netting £500 per month per property. They're all in the value of from 45,000 to 50,000. So it's much easier to acquire in that price range. They are they're all local authority, which means the rent is 100% covered by the government. It's paid direct to the letting agent, so it's low risk. I like the fact as well that in that area, there's a really poor quality level of housing. What we're doing is we're providing houses that are, they don't look aesthetically pleasing because of the areas they're in and the price band. But inside they're done to a really good spec. They're warm, they're dry, they're safe, and it's giving families back a space that they are comfortable in. And as a result, then we have negligible issues in terms of arrears, and also in terms of occupancy, it's really high. We've got a very low turnover rate in terms of letting, so people tend to stay longer because they're happy. So again, it was that vision of what we wanted in that space, and then coming back to, okay, finding that solution and then just going from there.
It's interesting journey, right? And so much that has been done so quick. It seems like once you find that right relationship, that can help expedite it, right? But turnkey solutions, right, and lining it up with, I think the biggest point is lining it up with your values, right, and your
Absolutely.
vision, um, and to create a positive experience, right? Because you were landlords before, but had a very different experience. Probably
Exactly.
landlords on a much bigger asset, worth a lot more, less cash flow, more hands-on, pain in the butt. That
Yeah.
now you can go buy 6, 12, 36 with what that asset was, and probably be much happier as a result.
Exactly. And have our risk diversified. So in terms of asset classes and what you were talked about that, to me, this kind of I think of it in terms of a pyramid. So, the pyramid has four sides. So one side of it's equities. And as you kind of go up in your equities. So my index trackers for me, they're at the very base of the pyramid. I have the vast majority of my funds in terms of equities in that space. And then as I go up, yes, I have other things like say I have say some crypto and some different bits and bobs that are higher risk, but I have a smaller percentage. So as we get towards the top of the pyramid, I have smaller percentage of my total pot in there because it's higher risk. So as the risk goes up, my holding goes down, but I have some exposure in higher risk areas. But the index trackers for me, they're so easy, they're so simple, they automate, the returns are amazing. So the vast majority is in there. In terms of property, then it's the same space. Now we started again at the bottom of the pyramid because I want to kind of make it so that it's quite low risk. So we're in local authority housing, buy to let market. It's very steady Eddie, very vanilla, nothing sexy about it, but it's giving us standard return. Our risk is very diversified across, because like you explained, with that kind of purchase price, we can afford to hold significantly more than if we had one in Ireland, at a much higher price point. So the same strategy applies with property. So as you go up that pyramid in property, you have higher stuff at the top, kind of more venture capital stuff, which I'm not in the space of yet, but maybe down the line, when we feel like I've got a really solid foundation, I will look into that space, because obviously, again, the returns are going to be higher, but the risk is going to also be higher. So at this stage, I'm happy to stay, in the steady Eddie stuff for now. But then the other two sides, the pyramid, I would look at it as business. So they, to me, are things like my financial wellness teaching. So I'm building a number of resources. So I have got a course on Udemy. I've got stuff going out in Groupon. So they're kind of low risk stuff and very low input from me. And then I have more hands-on one-to-one stuff. So different price points. And I have a couple. I have we're converting part of our house at the moment to self-contained apartments. That will add another stream of income in terms of low input. Once it's established, there'll be somebody who cleans it, the booking system will be automated, and that will be another stream of income. And shipping containers, different things in there that I've tried over the years, vending machines. There's all sorts of different options available that you can have in the low input business space, and trying to automate your own business as well as much as you can, systemize it so that it takes you out of it, and so that you're back to that vision of what that ideal day is and living it. And then, the fourth side of the pyramid for me is me. And I probably should have started with that, because that's where it all comes from. When I'm in a good space, when I'm looking after myself, then I have the clarity of mind and the foresight to see, okay, well, intuitively, what's the next step? What isn't working here? So I had the vision in terms of property. Property is a really good asset, but the way I'm involved in it right now, it's just not working for me. Okay, well, what would work for me? And it's working through that, because a lot of people get into property, have a very negative experience. And, we this year, our house down the country, we sold. Before we sold it, just when we put it on the market, the Criminal Assets Bureau seized our house and arrested our tenants for €500,000 worth of hardcore drugs. So it's like, okay, right, it's a problem. How do we sort it? And people have so many experiences like that they go, okay, I don't want anything to do with it. But I was able to separate the two and go, no, okay, this happened. This does happen in the property space, but this doesn't mean that property is not a great asset class to be involved in. This just means that I don't want to be involved in it in this particular way. The way it works for me in the Northeast works absolutely perfectly, because it's hands off, it's totally turnkey, and somebody else takes that stress. So often people are burned in property, and then like I stepped away. But when I looked at it again and kept looking at the rich list and thinking, real estate is a massive part of this. If I'm not in this and to a bigger degree, I'm not going to be able to make those leaps I want to leap. So I needed to find a strategy that fitted with what I wanted. And so it was about that. And it was about separating from a mindset point of view, my negative experiences with property versus the potential that it had to offer me. So that was a huge piece and a good distinction to make.
Clarification question. When you say buy to let, what does buy to let mean?
Rental. So rental.
Yeah.
It's not like, say, a house of multiple occupancy or a serviced accommodation. It is kind of, a rental agreement with a tenant, whether that's a government tenant or a private professional.
So you're buying, rehabilitating the property a bit, and then renting long term.
Yes.
Got it. So the four sides of your pyramid, essentially you've got equities, you've got real estate, you've got business, and then you've got self. And then there's different stratifications as you build up that in terms of risk, in terms of, potential reward. But it sounds like you've really been intentional about establishing that base and building brick by brick as you kind of move towards the top on all faces, simultaneously and, at the same time, which takes a lot of thought, takes a lot of intuition, as you said, that yes, us men are not as intuitive as women sometimes and gets us in a lot of trouble, but really great that you've been able to build that. As we're wrapping up, is there, one thought or one idea that you want to leave with the audience as, if you're to take one thing from this conversation, what would that be?
I think it's probably just to address a point you just made, is that whilst it may come across to you that I built that simultaneously, it started with that first step, that realization of, okay, this is not how I want it to be. We're not in a good place. I want to be in a better place. What do I do? And it was that first step. It was that 20 euro. From there, it has been step by step. The last 18 months have been a bit off the wall in terms of things have really snowballed. But the initial first 5 years of building this have really came from that 20 euro, and everything stemmed from there. COVID and a divorce and all that kind of really spiraled the last 18 months. But the first chunk of the journey came from that commitment to go, you know what, it needs to be something different. So if listeners are in a space of feeling overwhelmed and just don't have that sense of financial wellness, it's really about coming back to the basics of what is it that you'd like to make, and what's that next step. And that amazing quote, I can't remember who made it, is that you don't need to see the whole staircase to take the next step. So it's what's your next step, and you take the next one. And then I had a vision of what I wanted, in the very beginning, but I was nowhere near where I wanted to be. But I knew what the next step was. And once I took that, I knew what the next one was. And that was all what it was, because being, I was so sleep deprived at that stage. There was no way I had the foresight to see. If you told me I'd be doing what I'm doing now, 5 years ago, I would have thought, no way. There's no way that's not going to happen. But it was just that one foot in front of the other that got me. So that's what I'd encourage listeners to do, is identify what that next step is, and just keep taking those steps, because it does, when you look back on where you've been, where you've come from, it is just a case of baby step after baby step. And people think that they need days, hours, weeks, loads of time and effort. I turned this around, after bedtime when the kids were in bed, a little bit of study, a phone call, email here. I didn't have hours and days to put into this. So, a common excuse I get is I don't have the time. Like, nah, okay, you don't have the priority. There's a big difference. If this is really paining you and hurting you at the moment, you'll make the time, you'll take this next step. So, don't procrastinate. The one thing we don't have more of is time. So every day is costing. Take the next step as soon as you can.
What's the best way for our audience to connect back with you, Caitriona?
I'm on LinkedIn with just under my name, Caitriona Ellis, and I share my stuff there. Or I'm also on Facebook, 90 Days to Financial Wellness. So they're my two main platforms.
Awesome. Appreciate the time today, Caitriona. Love the insight. Love the perspective. Very appreciative, and look forward to staying connected.
Cool. Thank you, Liam. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Take care.